Last week, Pharma Bro Martin Shkreli was sentenced to 7 years in prison for securities fraud. We'll talk about that sentence in a minute. But before we do, let's focus on the fact that he was going to prison not because of what he did in raising the price of drugs from $13 to $750 for an AIDS drug. He went to prison because he was ripping off rich people. Didn't matter that he was ripping off the average consumer. That's okay. We'll talk about that. But ripping off rich people in Ponzi scams, well, that's really, people misunderstand why he was sentenced. Peter, one reason he was sentenced is because the guy has such a horrendous personality. Think about this. When you look at the transcript, you follow this story, the defense lawyer had to stand up in front of the judge during sentencing and say, yes, Judge, this guy is a horrendous character. Most of the time, I want to punch him in the face. Every now and then, I want to hug him, but I want to punch him in the face because he, A, has some type of social dysfunction. B, he believes he's an intellectual giant. He tries to send out the message that he's an intellectual giant and understands bioscience really well, better than anybody else. He's the smartest guy in the room. C, yes, he's done some terrible things like telling his 70,000 followers that if you bring me a clip of Hillary Clinton's hair, I'm going to give you $5,000.
That's what landed him in jail to start off with. I mean, it's crazy.
We'll talk about that. I mean, this is complicated for a lot of reasons, but really the way this really lands is that he was sentenced because he stole from rich people, not because
here's the message that this sends. The message sends, if you're going to price gouge, you can price gouge on schizophrenics, you can price gouge on AIDS patients. Here, he ran the price of the drug from $13.50 to $750. That didn't land him in jail. That didn't land him in trouble. What landed him in trouble was that he took money from one company and put it into another at the expense of his shareholders. That's what landed him in jail, coupled with his personality defect, that he was laughing at the court, laughing at the judge, making a mockery of the system. I think he just irritated everyone to no end, including his own lawyer, and that's what landed him in jail.
What about this story? You know, this is crazy. The defense lawyer standing, oh, man, his upbringing has caused this. Well, no, not really. This guy was brought up in upper middle class America. There's no poverty. There's no awful situation surrounding his life. But the point is, I've been a prosecutor, and I've had to watch defense lawyers fall on their sword somewhat, but nothing like when you say, this guy is such a pompous ass that I've really wanted to punch him in the face because he has no social skills. He's completely dysfunctional where it comes to his ability to interact with people.
His defense lawyer, I mean, he was facing 34 years in jail. His defense lawyer humanized him a little bit to the point where he's got 7.
Yeah.
He could have been in the clink for a long time.
Yeah. Well, what he was doing, if you followed this story, obviously he's got some real serious gremlins. I mean, when he's talking about his mansion that he owns and he's doing exposés on his mansion, his cars, his Maserati that he drives, there's something fundamental missing here. And I think the defense lawyer going into this just simply understood, I can't make this guy into something he's not. He's barely human. But there's another part of the story I think is really important. You mentioned Zyprexa. Mm-hmm. Now that's a case we handled. Here's Zyprexa. The Eli Lilly that made Zyprexa was fined $1.4 billion because they were involved in kickback schemes, okay, where they were paying doctors to prescribe Zyprexa for other things than it had been approved for. FDA approved it for schizophrenia, very narrow kind of use, schizophrenia. Well, Lilly took it on themselves to go out and sell the American public as, gee whiz, you can use this for anything. They were using it for depression. They were using it for a whole host of mental illnesses that there was no indication that it was made for that. But Lilly, about 6 or 7 people at the top of the food chain at Lilly, had to plead guilty to a criminal offense of doing this kickback scheme. But you know what? Not one of them went to jail because there again, all they did, and people died from using Zyprexa. They died because it was used wrong. Eli Lilly understood that. They understood that it was just this kickback scheme was a criminal offense. They pled to a criminal offense, but nobody went to prison. But on the other end, Skrelly steals from the rich people. He has this scam,
going to jail.
and he goes to jail.
Yeah, can you imagine you go into the doctor's office, you go into your stockbroker's office, you go into anybody that's in a position of trust that knows more than you do, and you're getting advice about what kind of drug it impacts your health, impacts whether you're going to make it, the AIDS drug, and the doctor or your financial advisor is getting paid to
Yeah.
recommend that product.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a mutual fund, if it's a money manager, if it's a specific drug. Why is it so difficult for the regulators to figure out that should be illegal? And if you're going to pay people to recommend advice, to recommend prescriptions, to recommend things that impact your health, that it can't be. We got to send some people up the river.